Before you watch this heartwarming story about human dignity, kindness, and what happens when cruelty meets compassion, hit that like button right now and subscribe so you never miss these incredible moments that will restore your faith in humanity. This story will absolutely move you. Don't miss it. ***. It was a busy Friday afternoon in downtown Portland, Oregon. The streets were packed with tourists enjoying the nice weather. People were shopping, dining at outdoor restaurants, taking photos of the beautiful architecture. It was the kind of perfect day that brought visitors from all over the world to this scenic city. At the corner of 5th and Morrison Street, something was happening that most people didn't notice. A man named Robert Chin, who was 67 years old and completely blind, was trying to cross the street. He had a white cane in his hand and his service dog by his side, a well-trained German shepherd who knew exactly how to navigate traffic safely. Robert had crossed this intersection hundreds of times. He knew the traffic patterns. He knew the sound of the pedestrian signal. He knew how to get from one side to the other safely with the help of his dog. But today, a group of 5 tourists, probably in their early 20s, probably on spring break, were standing near the crosswalk. When they saw Robert starting to cross with his cane and his dog, they started laughing. Not quiet chuckles, but loud, mocking laughter. One of the tourists even pulled out his phone and started filming. "Look at this guy," one of them called out. "He's using a blind person with a dog. How funny is that?" They were filming him without his consent. They were laughing at him. They were treating his disability like it was entertainment. Robert heard them. He froze for just a moment, clearly uncomfortable. But he didn't say anything. He just continued crossing the street, his hand on his dog's harness, his face filled with quiet dignity despite the humiliation. But someone else saw what was happening. A woman named Officer Sarah Martinez, who worked as a K-9 trainer for the Portland Police Department, had pulled over nearby. She'd just finished a training session with her partner, a drug detection dog named Duke. What she witnessed in those next few minutes would lead to a confrontation that would change how everyone in that group thought about disability, respect, and human dignity. To understand why this moment was so significant, you need to know the real story behind the situation and the people involved. Robert Chin was 67 years old and had been blind since his mid-50s due to complications from diabetes. He'd lost his sight gradually, and it had been one of the hardest experiences of his life. But he'd adapted. He'd gotten training with his service dog, Marco. He'd learned to navigate the city. He'd rebuilt his life. Robert had worked as an accountant for 30 years before his blindness. He was intelligent, capable, and independent. He didn't see his blindness as a reason to stop living his life. He still went to work 3 days a week at a nonprofit organization that helped low-income families with tax preparation. He lived alone in an apartment he loved. He went out and did normal things. And one of those normal things was crossing the street at 5th and Morrison to get to the coffee shop where he met friends every Friday. For Robert, crossing this street wasn't about being brave or inspiring. It was just life. It was what he had to do to participate in society. It was what any person with a disability had to do, navigate a world that wasn't built for them while also dealing with people who wanted to treat them like they were inspiration porn or objects of ridicule. Officer Sarah Martinez was 42 years old and had been a police officer for 15 years. The last 5 years, she'd specialized in K-9 training. She loved working with dogs. She loved the precision and intelligence of the animals and the training process. But Sarah had a personal connection to disability. Her older brother had been born deaf. Growing up, Sarah had watched how people treated her brother, with pity, with mockery, with a lack of respect for his capabilities. She'd seen how people assumed he couldn't do things. She'd seen how people laughed at him. As an adult, Sarah had become fiercely protective of disabled people's rights and dignity. She couldn't stand cruelty toward vulnerable people. She couldn't tolerate mockery of people just trying to live their lives. When Sarah saw those tourists laughing at Robert, something inside her snapped. The setting asterisk a busy downtown street corner. Midday Friday. Hundreds of people around. Tourist groups, local workers on lunch breaks, shoppers. The corner of 5th and Morrison. Robert with his cane and his service dog. A group of entitled tourists with phones out, filming, laughing. The conflict asterisk, there's a fundamental clash here between people who saw a disability as something to mock and a man trying to live with dignity. There's also a question about kindness, respect, and what kind of society we want to be. The stakes asterisk Robert's dignity. The broader question of whether people with disabilities will be treated with respect or ridicule. The question of whether anyone would stand up for someone being publicly humiliated. Sarah parked her car quickly and got out. She saw the tourists still filming, still laughing as Robert made his way across the street with Marco. She walked straight toward them, her police badge visible on her belt, her K-9 credentials clear. She had authority, but more importantly, she had conviction. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'd like to talk to you all for a moment." The tourists turned to look at her. They seemed confused about why a police officer would approach them. "That man you were just filming and laughing at," Sarah said, pointing toward Robert, who had now safely crossed the street. "What you were doing was cruel. And I want you to understand why." One of the tourists, a young man with a cocky attitude, started to protest. "We were just having fun," he said dismissively. "It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal," Sarah said, her voice steady. "That man is 67 years old. He's been blind for over a decade. He lost his sight through no fault of his own. He's managed to rebuild his life and maintain his independence. And you were treating him like he was a circus animal. You were mocking him. You were filming him without his consent." She stepped closer, and her voice grew more intense. "Let me tell you something about that man. His name is Robert Chin. He works. He has friends. He has a life. He's not on the street begging for pity. He's living his life. And what you did, what you're doing by reducing his existence to entertainment, that's dehumanizing. That's cruel." The tourists were starting to look uncomfortable. A small crowd was gathering, sensing that something significant was happening. Sarah continued, her voice passionate. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have a disability? Do you have any idea what it's like to navigate a world that wasn't built for you? To have people stare at you? To have people make assumptions about what you can and can't do? To have people treat you like you're less than human because of something you can't control?" She pointed to her K-9. "This is Duke. Duke is a police dog. He helps us detect illegal drugs. He's incredibly intelligent. He's trained. He saves lives. But Duke doesn't have hands. Duke doesn't have the ability to speak human language. Duke can't read or write. But nobody mocks Duke. Nobody treats Duke like he's less than. We respect Duke for what he can do." Sarah paused, and her voice grew even more powerful. "That man you were just laughing at? He's infinitely more capable than Duke. He can think. He can read. He can work. He can have relationships. He can navigate the world. The only difference between him and you is that he can't see. And that single difference made you decide he was worthy of mockery. That says everything about your character." The young man who'd made the first dismissive comment was now staring at his shoes. "I want you to do something," Sarah said. "I want you to think about how that man must have felt, hearing you laugh at him. I want you to think about the embarrassment, the humiliation, the realization that his existence, just trying to live his life and cross a street, was something people thought was funny." She looked at each of them in turn. "I want you to understand that laughing at someone with a disability isn't humor. It's cruelty. And cruelty reveals something ugly about who you are as people." One of the tourists, a young woman, suddenly spoke up. I didn't realize," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. We were just being stupid." "Stupid is doing something without thinking," Sarah said. "But you were filming. You were being intentional. You were planning to post that video somewhere, weren't you? You were planning to mock this man to people across the internet." The young man admitted reluctantly that yes, they'd planned to post it on social media with the caption, "Blind guy pretends to be professional." Sarah took a deep breath. That video, if you'd posted it, would have violated this man's privacy. It would have mocked his disability. It would have been part of a larger pattern of dehumanization that people with disabilities face every single day. And I want you to delete it. Right now. I want you to delete it and apologize to that man. The tourists looked at each other. For a moment, Sarah thought they might refuse. But then the young woman who'd apologized pulled out her phone. "I'll delete mine," she said. She navigated to the video and deleted it. The other tourists followed suit. "Now," Sarah said, "I want you to come with me. I want you to meet Robert. I want you to apologize to him in person. And I want you to hear his story." The tourists hesitated, but Sarah's authority was clear. They followed her to the coffee shop where Robert had been heading. Sarah found Robert sitting at a table by the window with a friend. She explained what had happened, and Robert's expression shifted from shame to something more complex. A mix of hurt and resignation, as though this kind of public humiliation was something he'd learned to expect. But then the tourists approached. The young woman who'd been most receptive spoke first. "I'm really sorry," she said, and Sarah could tell she meant it. "We were being cruel. We deleted the video. And I want you to know that what that officer said really affected us. We didn't think about how you would feel." Robert looked at them carefully, his blind eyes pointed in their direction despite not being able to see them. "Thank you for apologizing," he said. "And thank you for deleting the video. That means something." The tourists stayed and talked with Robert for over an hour. He told them about losing his sight. He told them about his work. He told them about his life. He told them about how common it was for people with disabilities to be treated as objects of mockery rather than as people. By the end of the conversation, all 5 tourists were in tears. They understood, in a way they hadn't before, that their mockery had been cruel. They understood that Robert was a person deserving of respect, not a source of entertainment. One of them said, "I'm going to volunteer with disabled advocacy organizations when I get home. I want to do something to help counter this kind of treatment." The young woman said, "My best friend is deaf. I never realized before today how the way I sometimes treat her, the assumptions I make, the way I sometimes talk to her like she's less capable, how all of that comes from the same place as what we were doing today. I'm going to do better. I'm going to be a better friend." Robert smiled, and Sarah could see genuine warmth in his expression. "Thank you," Robert said simply. "That's all anyone can ask. When people understand and commit to doing better, that's when change happens." The story didn't end there. The tourists posted something on social media. Not the cruel video, but a post about their experience. They explained what they'd been doing. They explained how they'd been corrected by a police officer. They explained how they'd learned a lesson about disability and dignity. The post went viral. Millions of people saw the tourists' apology and Robert's story. News outlets picked it up. Major media organizations featured stories about disability representation and mockery. The story sparked a national conversation about how people with disabilities are treated. More importantly, it sparked conversations at the local level. Portland City Council began working on initiatives to reduce bullying of people with disabilities. Local schools began incorporating disability awareness into their curricula. Disability advocacy organizations saw an increase in volunteers and donations. Officer Sarah Martinez's actions were recognized. She was given an award by the Portland Police Department for her commitment to protecting vulnerable populations. Disability rights organizations asked her to speak at conferences about her approach to intervention. But perhaps most significantly, Robert Chen's story changed something in how people in Portland thought about disability and dignity. When people saw him crossing the street with Marco, they no longer laughed. Instead, they moved out of his way respectfully. People began holding doors for him. People began treating him not as a source of entertainment or pity, but as a fellow human being navigating his own life. 1 year after the incident, Robert Chen stood at a podium speaking to a group of high school students about disability awareness. "I want to tell you about a day that changed how I think about humanity," Robert said. "A day when I was mocked by tourists, then defended by a police officer, and ultimately taught an important lesson about dignity and respect." He told the students the entire story. He told them about how it felt to be laughed at. He told them about how a stranger's intervention had changed the tourists' hearts. He told them about how those tourists had gone home and made better choices because of that moment. "I learned something that day," Robert said. "I learned that one person standing up, one person saying that cruelty isn't acceptable, that's enough to change things. I learned that people are often cruel not because they're fundamentally bad, but because they haven't been taught to think about the humanity of people who are different from them." He paused, and his voice grew stronger. "But I also learned something else. I learned that when one person is brave enough to intervene, when one person is willing to challenge cruelty, other people pay attention. Other people learn. Other people change." The story had incredible ripple effects. Other police departments across the country implemented training based on Sarah's approach. Other officers learned not just to arrest or cite people for harassment, but to take the opportunity to educate and change behavior. Schools incorporated Robert's story into their curricula. Students learned about disability rights and dignity through his experience. Disability advocacy organizations used the story to show what real inclusion and respect looked like. They used it to train workplaces, restaurants, and other businesses about how to treat people with disabilities. Most remarkably, the 5 tourists who'd initially mocked Robert became advocates for disability rights. They formed a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating bullying and mockery of people with disabilities. The organization grew into a national movement with chapters in 30 states. The young woman who'd been most receptive even went into social work specifically focused on disability advocacy. She eventually worked with Robert's organization, helping low-income disabled people navigate employment and public access. But the real measure of change was in the daily moments. Robert began receiving messages from people across the country who'd heard his story and changed their behavior. Parents wrote to say they were teaching their children to be respectful of people with disabilities. Teachers wrote to say they'd incorporated disability awareness into their classrooms. Business owners wrote to say they'd made their facilities more accessible. One man wrote, "I used to make jokes about people with disabilities. I didn't realize how cruel I was being until I heard your story. Now, whenever I see someone with a disability, I treat them with the same respect I'd want if I were in their position. Thank you for changing my perspective." Another person wrote, "Your story helped me understand my own mother better. She has a disability, and I realized I'd been treating her with pity instead of respect. I'm working on being a better child to her." Letters like this came in regularly. Robert read them and understood the profound impact of that one day. One police officer's intervention. One disabled man's dignified response. Millions of people's hearts and minds changed. The real moral asterisk. This story teaches us something fundamental about humanity, cruelty, and compassion. Cruelty toward people with disabilities is often born not from malice, but from ignorance. People who've never had to navigate the world with a disability often don't understand what that experience is like. They don't realize that mocking someone with a disability is dehumanizing. They don't realize that they're treating a person like they're less than human. But what Officer Sarah Martinez understood was that education can change this. That intervention can work. That when you help someone understand the humanity of a person they've been cruel to, real transformation becomes possible. Sarah could have cited those tourists for harassment. She could have called it a day. But instead, she chose to educate. She chose to connect them with Robert. She chose to help them see Robert's full humanity. And it worked. The tourists became advocates. They changed their behavior. They started teaching other people what they'd learned. The universal truth asterisk. When we encounter cruelty, we have a choice. We can stay silent and let it continue. We can respond with anger and confrontation. Or we can respond with compassion, not for the people being cruel, but for their potential to be better. Officer Sarah Martinez chose that third path. She intervened with authority, but also with wisdom. She didn't just punish, she educated. She didn't just correct, she connected them with the humanity of the person they'd been cruel to. And that's what led to transformation instead of just compliance. Robert Chin showed us something remarkable too. Despite being publicly humiliated, he responded with dignity. He accepted the tourists' apology. He told them his story. He gave them a chance to be better. That kind of grace is what makes transformation possible. For everyone watching this story asterisk, ask yourself, have I ever been cruel to someone I didn't realize was deserving of respect? Have I ever mocked someone for being different? Have I ever treated someone with a disability as something less than fully human? Most of us have to some degree. Most of us have laughed at something we shouldn't have. Most of us have made an assumption about someone based on a disability or difference. The question is, what will we do about it? Will we continue to be cruel? Or will we, like the tourists in this story, allow ourselves to be educated? Will we take the opportunity to understand people who are different from us? Will we treat people with the respect and dignity they deserve? That's the real message of this story. Change is possible. Transformation is possible. When we encounter our own cruelty, when someone helps us see it clearly, we have the opportunity to be better. And when we choose to be better, when we choose to respect and honor the dignity of all people, including those with disabilities, we make the world better for everyone. Did this story move you? Did it show you the power of intervention, education, and human dignity? Smash that like button right now and hit subscribe, because stories like this prove that one person's willingness to speak up can transform hearts and minds and create real change. From a single confrontation on a street corner to a national disability rights movement. This is what happens when someone chooses compassion and education over cruelty. You absolutely don't want to miss the next story where someone's brave choice ripples out and changes the world. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and let's keep celebrating the people who stand up for human dignity and make the world a more respectful place for everyone. Flexed biceps red heart, sparkles asterisk asterisk.